let me first say that we just met this morning over breakfast at 8 a.m. So a lot of what I heard, Kevin, bounce rate, Katrina, sort of password management concerns, and then the CI story are all seeding some of these use cases. And if anyone's looking for a breakfast spot, and we can tell you where not to go. But yeah, so let me start off. There's a lot of references to electronic resources. And if you walk through the exhibit hall like I did yesterday, Lexis, EBSCO, Wolters Kluwer, Thomson, Factiva are all examples of big name content providers that many organizations use. The organizations could be, well, they're agnostic. Any industry, public sector, private sector, and you can access this content with any technology. You actually mentioned, Sarah, the licensing. Licensing in the form of I'm buying a term license for an enterprise version of Lexis or West or other for my organization or a block of users. So you can actually, this is the norm with these resources. What electronic resource management systems do is give you insight into who's using the resources. We haven't run across a firm who has less than 10. So tens of these services or hundreds. And once you start implementing, your portfolio grows to multiple electronic resources. You have some challenges. One of them is password management. But the core value proposition of an electronic resource management system is, as Katrina mentioned, who's using it, delivering value to the organization, how are they using it, and are we getting our money's worth? So I think at the basic premise of an ERM tool is to ensure that you know the top 10, the most frequently used, the least frequently used, and that you're properly licensed. That gives you some background.
That's perfect. So I think one of the key things is often what you see in this marketplace is the content providers don't really want to tell you what the usage is. So you have to figure it out yourself. So why don't we start with can you give us a use case story of how most people implement ERM at a pretty basic level and that the standard use?
Typical usage is focusing on, is it a value to our organization? So this was actually with a private company, about 1,500 total users, and they have 52 services. I won't name any names, but the idea was over a period of 5 years, their standard protocol was their research services manager would ask the users. They do a poll twice a year, mid-year and towards the end of the year. This was consistent with their, number one, their budget cycle, and with when they had to renew some of their major online resources. Every year, for 5 years straight, they'd poll the enterprise, and they'd get back results. The results would be, yes, we need to renew them. And now the research services manager can go to the procurement director, the CFO, or the budget committee and say, yep, we validated that we're using these resources. The 6th year, they actually implemented an electronic resource management tool. And a little background on what the tool does. It's software, and it'll tell you who's logging in, what resource they're accessing, where in the resource they're accessing content, how long they're in the session, when they start, when they finish, and the active time. Now, as a research services manager, you can see what's happening in my enterprise today, yesterday, last week, last month, or the last 6 months or a year. So you're getting real-time information as to usage. They found, once they implemented the ERM tool, that within 60 days, 20% of the valued resources weren't touched. So pretty quickly, they realized they can whack those. In this example, they reduced that 20%, and they restructured a 500 user block down to 300, to give you some sense of the background. So I guess the point there is anecdotal versus real stats. Quite a comparison.
So the base case for ERM in this doing more with more is it's cost reduction. Standard, we want you to do more with less. Here's a good way to get to do it with less, but you're not doing a whole lot more. So let's, moving into the doing more with more, can you give us a couple of examples of the next kind of step in ERM and how you can use it to do more?
Okay, the electronic resources apply to all industries. You can access them with any technology. The tool themselves doesn't know whether you're looking at a public site or a paid-for subscription site. So in this case, it was an insurance company, a national insurance company, and they had been building over 2 years an internal knowledge management application. They had 3 developers and an outside platform to build the solution. They went live, cut the users off from the old system to the new, so now the new system was in production, and they got a revolt. The system does not deliver the value we had before. The interface is really poor, and I can't search for the content I need to get my work done. Well, the ERM, as I mentioned, it's agnostic. You can point it to anything. So they pointed their electronic resource management system to the knowledge management platform that they just launched. And in it, they saw usage behavior and stats that help them adapt and have a dialogue with users so they can refine the process. It took them about 4 months, but they increased adoption at least by 75%.
So, a good example of where having the data on how an internal system is being used. It's easy to say, oh, I've got Lexis and it's costing me X per year. You got 3 developers working on something, that's way more than Lexis.
I've got another example, actually. This one was for a financial institution, and the way they operated is they had 1,200 reps in field offices and working from home or mobile. Their legal and risk team, actually, their job was to curate and distribute regulatory compliance data so that the guys in the field can actually carry out their work. Their job was to actually make sure that they read the information, they understood it, and they used it as part of their practice. So the challenge here was the legal and risk team, they were going through the process of really curating well underwritten content and distributing it, but they didn't have a sense of the actual usability of those in the field. So just like the prior example, in their case, they used electronic resource management solutions to look at actually who read the compliance data. What they found was, let's just say they built an offenders list, right? Those folks who'd never touched the content. And I think the short end of that story is the compliance director started making phone calls, and pretty quickly they were compliant.
So that's great. So Marcus, as a last example, can you give us an example of taking ERM to really a strategic level?
I think Sarah hit on competitive intelligence, and if you're familiar with the CI initiatives, some of them include a process called current awareness, where you're basically applying search topics or a classification to external or to content. And it could be all of your electronic resources. It could be public content or paid for content. And the idea behind it is you search this information, your system it crawls these sources and brings back articles. It brings back a title, a URL, and maybe even an abstract based upon the topics you're interested in. So this is with a Fortune 500 company. Their chief marketing officer had implemented a CI initiative, and actually she was required to. And the challenge for her was she actually configured it to bring back information on a daily basis for their company in the news, specific competitors' names in the news, business trends, and patent trademark information. So this came in daily, which was the first step of their project. The second step of their project was actually to make it relevant to subject matter experts. Really powerful tools. But what she lacked was the user-specific, the subject matter-specific areas of expertise and what they were actually looking for in their day-to-day business. So down the hall, the research services manager used an electronic research management tool. And that's the bread and butter of these systems, right? They know who's accessing what, they know when, they can show a dashboard on frequency, but they also can show what I think is really the holy grail, what they're searching for. They'll capture query results. So if you take the query results and apply them to the CI initiative, those two actually paired up, and they won awards on their initiative. So a really robust end-to-end tool.
Well, and again, this comes back to that theme that we've talked about, for years running, which is finding the right strategic partner, partnering up, using the tools that you have, And what you suddenly are, you're at the C-suite level dealing with issues, and you become a partner to those much more strategic initiatives in the firm.
Yeah, I think the point here, one of the major points here is every use case, from the most basic, am I using my resources or not, to adoption or compliance or helping the CI team, it's the same tool. There was no development, there's no third-party consulting, it was just the initiative and sort of looking throughout your enterprise and where you could be of help.